I was in an accident at an air show, they called it actually a fly-in breakfast. A little tiny airport just in the town that I lived had a fundraising breakfast, and we were there walking around, hanging out, looking at planes, all these things, and a plane crashed. The plane crashed. He hit into the audience. I was just happened to be either the smallest or the slowest runner. I don't know, but the plane hit me. It was a very traumatic accident, caused a lot of physical damage to me.
So Tammy, in your book, and I quote, you say that there were only two paths forward: to live fully with strength and courage, or to give in and let life happen around me. What path did you choose for yourself?
I definitely chose the path of living in strength and courage and building a high quality of life. It certainly wasn't always easy or simple, but for me, even though I said there are two paths, it really felt like there was only one. It was just keep braving whatever I was facing and keep pushing and moving forward and building into this life that I have had and have continued to have now.
Yeah. And for the people who are watching or listening, you are a two-time Paralympian. Other than that, you've also been an athlete your whole life. But there's something that happened to you when you were age 6 that completely changed the trajectory of what your life has become and the person you've become today. What is it that happened when you were 6?
So I was in an accident at an air show, they called it actually a fly-in breakfast, but a little tiny airport just in the town that I lived had a fundraising breakfast, and we were there walking around, hanging out, looking at planes, all these things, and a plane crashed. And he hit into, I don't know exactly, but the plane crashed. He hit into the audience, and I was just happened to be either the smallest or the slowest runner. I don't know, but the plane hit me and caused, it was a very traumatic accident, caused a lot of physical damage to me. And then it also broke my brother's leg. Fortunately, he was okay after his bone healed. But I was in a wheelchair, and the injury also damaged my left arm. They think when I hit the ground, I hit so hard that I tore all the nerves in my shoulder. Mm-hmm. And some of it recovered, but never to the full extent of having 100% use.
Wow. And how long was the recovery?
I'd say that it was, up until even now. But the initial recovery was I spent at least 1 year in the hospital before I moved home completely. And then after that, it was still many years of physio and occupational therapy, learning how to do things with one hand. And then as I got back into parasport instead of able-bodied sport, then it became just building strength and muscle. So it was many years, that initial recovery. And then as an adult, even, I still continued to build more strength and grow as I became more athletic. Yep. So I kind of joke that my recovery has been almost my entire life since that accident at 6.
Yep. And is that why the title of your book is Still Fighting?
Yes, it struck a chord with me because I always say that my first fight really was the fight for my life when that accident happened, because my heart stopped twice. Wow. In the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and just before they began CPR, it started again. And so I was definitely fighting for my life at that point. And over the next few weeks, when I was in Vancouver and undergoing operations, I was still on a respirator for most of that time and fighting just to survive that incident. Yep. So for me, it was that was the first fight, and then it became fighting to go from being in a stretcher to a wheelchair, fighting from being in the hospital to moving back home, going back to school. Mm-hmm. And then just kind of continued. And then, my favorite fight was to make 2 Paralympic teams, but there were many fights along the way for accessibility, social acceptance, fighting my own self-doubts and fears. So yeah, still fighting really struck a chord with me. And even to this day, I still feel like I'm still fighting. I'm still advocating for accessibility. I'm still fighting to keep my quality of life really high. And now it's going to shift as I start to age, keeping mm-hmm. my fighting to keep my quality of life as I age. So I believe, we all need to keep fighting, and I'm still fighting.
Yep. And self-acceptance, I feel like this is something that everybody deals with. Even when I was growing up, there were times where I did not like myself. There were times where I would let what people around me were saying get into me and get into my head. In your case, as I read through the book, there were so many people who doubted you, your doctor, nurses, classmates, even up until you became an adult. As you would walk into a room, people would treat you like a chair instead of a human being. How did that make you feel? And then, more importantly, did that have a major impact on your life? Or is it something that you acknowledged and were able to and are still overcoming as time goes by?
Um, I think it did have an impact. So I'll backtrack. So, firstly, it definitely impacted me as a child. I felt at times that I was a less worthwhile human because I was in a chair or I was disabled, and that was fully not from my family or the people close in my life, but just fully from an external societal view, from the ways that people treated me or spoke about me or assumed that I couldn't speak for myself or I couldn't do things for myself.
Mhm.
And so it never um, made me believe that about I never believed I couldn't do things. It
Yep.
didn't go that far, but it made me really assess how the world saw me. And sometimes that was the struggle, was like, man, this is how people see me. I get judged, like you said, entering a room before I've even opened my
Mhm.
mouth. I don't even get a chance to say the wrong thing and
Yep.
they've already made a decision about me. So it took a long time to kind of find a way to respond when I've been treated like that. And so it took a lot of years of building. A lot of times I just took it and ignored it and
Yep.
tried to pass it off. And then as I grew up and matured and changed and built strength and built that resilience, I created ways to be able to say things to people and to try to educate them, not just be mad at them, but try to educate them in that moment as well. And so that kind of was the shift, I think, is once I was able to stand up for myself and hopefully change the perception of that one person in that moment who spoke to me that way, or who didn't speak to me, more likely. That kind of then changed how I saw myself and how I felt about myself.
Yep.
Mhm.
But so you think that the first step to self acceptance and then changing the way people perceive you is how you perceive yourself.
Mhm.
So you have to look at yourself as a positive influence because, for example, I see a lot of people who put themselves down.
Mhm.
Like they don't even give the other people the chance to put them down. Is
Mhm.
before they enter the room, they're telling themselves, I'm not enough, or I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not smart enough. But in your case, you went through this experience and this journey of accepting yourself for who you are and who you've become. And now it's a matter of, okay, I have to educate the people around me and show them that I'm human just as much as they are, and I
Mhm.
have just as much as information in my head as they do. So do you think it comes from within?
Yeah, I think there was a strength. I think we have to find it. I don't think it's automatic, right? I think we have to learn it and find it. And I think gradually, as I've felt my strength and built my strength, and whether it was through sports or through education, it just became a realization in myself that, yeah, I have to show my strength for people to see it, and for people then to not treat me like I'm weak or less than.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to show that to people, I have to feel that within myself. And
Yep.
it's not like every day I felt that way, or even now. I'm sure, there are still times where it's like I have those same doubts and fears that other people have, even now, where it's like, if I'm struggling to do something in my chair, or I don't look how I'd like to look in an outfit, it still comes up like, oh, if I wasn't in a chair, I wouldn't look like this or feel like this. Like
Yep.
maybe it tweaks a bit in the back of my head. But overall, I've just have to focus on, no, I've built this strength, I've built this confidence, I have this power, and push forward with that mindset instead.
And what does strength mean for you?
Ah, so much. It's so much more than muscular strength or athletic strength. It's just that, I tend to, something in my chest, in my heart, a power that just fuels me forward in all ways, in keeping my body moving, in keeping my mind and my confidence going, all of it. It's just an internal, I don't know, power and strength. I'm sure kind of the same word, but when you ask me strength, I'm like, it's just a power or a fire,
Yeah.
a fire that I've had in my heart or in my spirit that's just pushed me to keep moving.
Mm-hmm. And throughout the book, you talk about family. You talk about your parents, your siblings, your father, specifically also your grandfather, your coaches. You've had so many people influence your decision making, support you in the problems you were facing, and then also help you achieve the things that you've achieved. In my generation, I do feel like a lot of people think they can do things on their own. They think they can, any challenge that comes to them, I can do it on myself. And even as an entrepreneur, we see that they think that they don't need a team. They think that they can do things on their own and they can build the businesses on their own. And we're told, it's a one-man show, or, this is a self-made man. But do you really believe in that?
No, I think that we all need supports. Like, right from the time I moved home with my family, I was 7 years old and in a wheelchair that I had never been in before. And I wouldn't have been able to build the independence and the strength that I did without support. Like, I still had chores like my siblings did. My parents didn't let me, not that I didn't want to slack anyway, but also they wouldn't have let me. Like, it was very much okay, you're in a chair. That doesn't change the way everything else in life happens. So it was still teaching me independence, pushing me towards independence, wanting me to have good grades in school, and all of that was the same. And so without that in the beginning, I certainly wouldn't have built toward the independent life that I have. And I've seen other people through my career, just in life, that have had disabilities who weren't encouraged and supported in the same way. And maybe they still lived at home in their 30s or 40s, or they didn't find their strength or their power. So I definitely believe that you need people around you to help. And I think there are times that people around you, if you do have your own self-doubts, which everybody does at some point, that they can help cancel those. And that was particularly the case with my coach, Mandy. I certainly had times in the pool where I was like, man, I can't do that next 50 or that next 100, or I'm not going to make the time I need in that race. And she was definitely the countering voice of constantly like, no, we've done it before, or it doesn't matter. I know you can do this just based on knowing you. And so, yeah, I believe we definitely need a team, and it's pretty hard to build the life that you want completely independently, or the business that you want, or the athletic career. I don't think any of it can be fully on your own.
Yep. And then even when you were growing up, this was before the accident, you were ice skating on a national level, or
a provincial level.
Level. And then post-accident, you started competing on the world stage. You went to Rio, you went to the Tokyo Olympics as well. But even in between, you were skiing, you started cycling, and I think there's a different term for it.
Hand cycling.
So do you think that just keeping yourself busy, going to the gym, having some sort of a hobby, sport, has also helped with overcoming the obstacles you faced, both mental and physical?
Absolutely. Being athletic and involved in sport has really changed like my self-image as well. And it also gave me another identity. Like, when I was a kid and I was just the kid in the wheelchair, as I became an athlete, then I was seen as an athlete, not seen as the kid in the wheelchair. And then even, through life and as an adult into the Paralympics, instead of just being, some woman in a wheelchair that society would like to kind of see me as invisible or not see me.
Yep.
Instead of that, I was an athlete, and being seen as an athlete, often it came with that respect of understanding my discipline and my motivation and my hard work. And so it was a way to create a different identity for me. And through that identity then as well, I can show the world that all the people who are different, who are maybe not completely perfectly physical, physically, excuse me, there's still value and something to be gained by having us in society. And so it was that, like I said, changing the identity for myself and building my self-image, as well as showing other people what I can do.
Mm-hmm. And for anybody watching or listening who's dealing with their own obstacles, they're either unable to get out of bed every morning, they feel like they aren't enough, and they're just sick of living a life that they're not comfortable with. What is your advice to them?
I think it's you have to look at where you are, and if it's not comfortable or it's not fulfilling you, there has to be changes no matter how hard it is. You have to be willing and able to make changes. And again, it's certainly not simple, and I would never make light of, just change your mindset. It's not as easy as that, but it's certainly finding a shift in your perspective. And so one of the things I talk about is being a wheelchair user. I'm so thankful I can drive a car with hand controls, but I hate putting my chair in my car. It's maybe 3 minutes it takes me, but it irritates me that I have to take those extra 3 minutes. And if I'm running behind, I'm 3 more minutes behind than an able-bodied person. And so it frustrates me, but worse for me would be not being able to drive and being fully dependent on other kinds of transportation. So that's the shift in perspective that I have to make, sometimes daily. Sometimes I'm just like, eyes rolled up like, I don't want to do this. And then I'm like, oh, but I love driving my car. And so, and sometimes it has to be really simple shifts. Like you have to start baby steps and just start with really, really small things. But I think being able and willing to shift our perspective and find, it's a bit cliche, but find the silver lining and find a reason that this is better than, like, this might suck and be hard, but it's still better than the alternative. And I think if you can find those in some small things, then you can start to find that shift in perspective in the bigger picture and start to move forward.
And how would somebody find that shift in perspective? Let's say it's somebody who's going to university but doesn't see the value in getting an education, or doesn't have hope because of what's happening in the world. How does somebody like that shift their perspective on things?
I think in those kinds of instances, it's just, like I said, picking something small. And so maybe there's one class at university that has more meaning to them than the others. So just focusing on that one part and being like, well, this class is worthwhile, makes everything else that I think not worthwhile. Or, and because I feel like as our world continues to change and maybe be worse than it used to be, or be different. I don't know the word, but I used to always think there would be more and more places we could travel instead of fewer places we could travel. But so it does weigh on me a little bit too, that the world is more difficult or going through more challenges. But in those instances, I'm just trying to shift my perspective on my local community first, and maybe simple things like someone opening the door for me when I'm struggling, like just to be like, oh, there are good people, there is still humanity. And so if really, really little things first. And then I think when you can find the positive in the small things, you can start to grow that mindset.
I love that, because I feel like we're all focused on the big picture. And we were talking about this before actually the podcast, but a lot of the people I meet, for example, we were talking about the university example because I know lots of students and aspiring business owners or people looking to get into the workforce are going to be watching this. But they have, let's say, 3 years left in their degree. And they'll be there thinking, oh my God, I have to do this for 3 more years. But they're not focused on the smaller picture where for another 3 years, I have certain freedoms that I may not have after the 3 years. Or I have friends, I have this group that I can hang out with every single day with no repercussions, right? When you're older, you can't do that. So it's just a matter of finding those really, really small things that give you even 1% happiness or fulfillment.
Absolutely.
And that just keeps you going.
And I think that when you find the 1%, then it's easier to find the next percent, and then it's 5% and 10%. And when you can start small, then it kind of blossoms.
Yep. Is that the type of framework you use to get kind of past the experiences you were facing when you were getting treatment. So post accident, you were in the hospital for 11 months, if I'm
Hmm.
not mistaken, and you were traveling very often, different hospitals. You had a total of how many operations and surgeries?
Around 25.
Wow. So
Hmm.
25 surgeries at the age of 6,
Hmm.
between the ages of 6 and 8.
Yes.
Wow. So is that the type of mental framework you use to get through that?
Yeah, like I really remember after surgery, there were little things like coming out of anesthetic. Of course, first would be terrible, but I started to learn that was a short
Mm-hmm.
amount of time, and then often um, there would be medical devices like a nose tube for drainage or like a drainage tube in my leg or something to help me heal. And as each piece came out or got changed, like if the nose tube came out, it was like, oh, I'm that one step more now to feeling better and leaving the hospital. And once, say, if I'd had surgery and stitches came out, so I kind of had to look at those steps.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I was young, I did learn that, be like, okay, it's really bad right now. Maybe tomorrow my nose tube will come out. Maybe
Uh-huh.
in 5 days my stitches will come out and I can move easier and there won't be as much pain. And so, yeah, even young like that, I learned to look at the steps and not be like, oh, I want to be home and back at school, because then you have to look at, if you look that far ahead, it's almost insurmountable because there's so much in between.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just looking at each step one at a time, it's much easier to feel the success and pass those steps.
Yeah. It's like the example where when you get to the peak and you look down, you're like, okay, I've done this, and you don't get that sense of fulfillment compared to when you're climbing up the mountain,
Mhm.
because you're looking forward to something, but once you get it, there's no sense of fulfillment anymore.
Yeah.
So you're over and done with it.
Yeah, you have to absorb and enjoy the journey, even if it's
Mhm.
rough. You have to absorb that journey, and I think the fulfillment is greater at the end if you've done that during the pathway.
Tell me about some of the experiences you had in the hospital. Lots of stories about nurses. There was one specific nurse, her name was Karen, if I'm not mistaken, who took care of you during your treatment days. And obviously, for people watching and listening, your parents weren't around you for those
Not
11
all the
months. So
time.
they were coming and going, and your siblings were also visiting, but they
Mhm.
had school and they had to go on with their lives.
Yeah.
So you were surrounded by nurses and doctors 24/7.
Mhm.
So what are the fondest memories you have from those days?
So the one story that I put in the book was the water fight.
Yeah.
And that was early on, like when I was still in the isolation ward. And there was a nurse who knew that like I had already been through a lot, but I was still a kid. And so he filled a bunch of syringes of varying sizes, put them under my pillow and pushed me around on a stretcher
Mhm.
and let me shoot people with water. And I very like, I can fully put myself back in that moment. I have such a clear memory of it. And it was such an impact, I think, that he made on me that day of just letting me have fun and be a kid again. And then the physiotherapist who helped me get a proper, like, little sports wheelchair rather than a big hospital chair. The doctor at the time didn't believe that he believed I would mostly be on a stretcher my whole life. A
Mhm.
wheelchair would just be for transportation.
Mhm.
And she saw more potential in me, thankfully, and had him really pushed him to sign the paperwork for my first sports chair, which right off the bat changed my life, because it changed how people saw me. Even though I still had trouble with that at times, there were people who could recognize the difference between a sports chair, meaning someone was more independent, versus a hospital chair where people were needing to be pushed around.
Mhm.
And it changed also what I saw for myself. It gave me that boost to be like, yeah, I don't need to be dependent. I don't need to be in a big chair that I can't manage. I can start to build my independence now at 7 years old.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
And then how were the days after the hospital? So you went back to school, and from what I remember from the book, you had to change schools because the current school you were enrolled in did not have accessibility, or
mhm,
the accessibility was really bad. And you were in a new environment. You were only 7, 8, 9 years old, and obviously you were different.
mhm.
So how did you deal with the challenges you faced while in school? Because obviously when you're around children, they're going to be thinking lots of different things, and it's not really coming from a bad place. at times it's just from out of curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you deal with that?
I think that was probably the hardest time in my life. And I don't really know that I dealt with it very well. I just kind of, I remember feeling overwhelmed and a little bit frustrated and hard to make connections with the new kids. So I think that it was probably a time where I wasn't, maybe I learned some resilience and strength from there, but I didn't have it in that moment or in the school. It was definitely, I think, my biggest challenge from accident up until being an adult. And then returning back from that school to my old school once they moved into grade 4 and into a building that was more accessible was then difficult again because the kids I had been with hadn't seen me for 2 years and now I was new again to them and new in a chair. So I think during that time, I don't know that I didn't have any magic to help me or any thing. I just had to grit through it and just manage the best that I could and focus on other things. I started to play wheelchair basketball during that time as well. So that kind of took me out of the community because we had to go to Edmonton to do that. And so I think it was more just that time frame was more just coping than thriving or dealing with.
Yep. And then when you started wheelchair basketball, how did your life change? Because now you're surrounded by other people who are also on wheelchairs. They're also dealing with the same stigma you were dealing with. So did you find your group? Or did you find camaraderie in those team members of yours?
So I did to some degree. And it was, I think I expected to, and I think everyone else expected that I would find my place with other kids like me. But unfortunately, because of my left arm not working as well, most of the kids that were playing wheelchair basketball were spinal cord injury and had full use of both of their arms, were just paralyzed from the waist down. So I still faced a bit of another barrier with them in that even though it was quite apparent that my left arm wasn't as strong, because I could do lots of things, maybe it wasn't as apparent as I felt like it was. So often, on the court, if I couldn't move my chair quick enough, they didn't seem to understand it was because my left arm didn't work as well. And so there was a little bit of a stigma even from other disabled people or other people who were wheelchair users that I wasn't doing good enough or I wasn't a good enough wheelchair person. So that was still like, I did find a place with them to some degree, but like I said, maybe not quite as much because then I still had this other separation of my left arm.
Yeah, I can understand. I mean, when you're a kid, it's hard enough dealing with judgment and the things people say around you. But when you're somebody who's seen differently, and in your school, from what I understood in your book, there was nobody else in a wheelchair, if I'm not mistaken. So you were the odd one out in that moment. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very small town and small community. So.
Hey guys, I'm going to make this really quick. I hate long breaks just as much as you do. So I just want to say I am new to this whole podcast thing. I know I'm not perfect. I know there's lots of room for improvement. But I want to make a promise to you that number one, I am going to try my level best to get the best guests on this show. I'm not going to get you the same guests that all these other hosts are getting. I'm going to get you people with unique stories, people who we can actually relate to, and people who have lived larger than life stories. And number two, I'm going to try my level best to always give you the highest level of quality as far as production, audio quality, and even the highest quality of me. I'm going to try to be the best host for you. In return, there's only two things I need from you. Number one, I need you to subscribe. The only way my team and I know we're going in the right direction is if you guys subscribe, like, or leave comments. So it's going to be super helpful for us to know if we're doing the right thing. Second thing, I need constructive feedback. If you think I'm doing a horrible job, don't just tell me I'm doing a horrible job. Tell me exactly what I need to improve on in the comments or even Instagram DM me. Or if you think I'm doing a really good job, then don't just tell me I'm doing a really good job. Break down what you think I'm doing good and what you think I need to improve on. Guys, I really appreciate you guys actually coming to the midpoint of this podcast. I'm so grateful and I really, really hope you enjoy this one and all the future podcasts that are going to come. Thank you so much.
So Tammy, at a mobility store, in your city, you saw a hand cycle for the first time in your life. What was that experience like? And from what I read, you were pretty excited to see that.
Yeah,
So walk me through that.
it was. I remember I went into the shop to have something worked on on my chair, and they had actually put it up on a wall, like on a stand, and I don't know if hand cycles were completely new at that time or just
My bad.
new to the area where I lived, but I definitely hadn't been exposed to them before. And so right away I asked the salesperson, who I knew quite well. I asked him about it, and say it was the conversation of, well, I don't know with your left arm, but let's try it. So I went back a few days later, and they had taken it down and set it up and let me give it a test ride in the parking lot. And just like within 2 minutes, it was just freedom. The way that the bike worked compared to pushing a wheelchair was much easier for my left arm. And because in a hand cycle, your hands go together, not opposing like your feet. So the strength of my right arm could push my left arm through the weak parts. Like if there's a catch in the circle where my left arm wasn't strong enough, it didn't matter because my right arm would push it through. And so the hand bike turned to be just, like I said, just pure a freedom that I hadn't experienced probably ever since I'd been injured.
Wow. And what did that lead to?
Ultimately, it led to Paralympics, just not in cycling or not in hand cycling, but that is the road that it took. I started riding lots and loved it, and just kept adding more and more kilometers, finding more distance, like more places that I could ride long distance. And I was able to load it in my vehicle and unload it and hop on it and go. So I took it places and rode. And then it led to my first triathlon. The gym that I had joined was doing a try your first triathlon, which was the short distance of 750 meters in a pool, 20 kilometers on a bike, and 5 kilometers wheeling or running at the end. And so I thought it sounded like a lot of fun when the gym was doing it. It was an only women's gym, and there were like 10 ladies that were going to do this triathlon. And because I'd had this hand bike and loved it so much, I decided to do that. And so that led into loving triathlon, getting a race chair for the run part. I expected if I was going to compete at a high level again, it would be in triathlon. So that's where I started, headed down that road. And they did put paratriathlon into the Rio Games, but about a year and a bit away from the games, they decided that my classification didn't have enough competitors in it, didn't have a large enough field of play, sorry, they called it. So they pulled my classification. So after retiring from basketball years before that, I already thought, oh, Paralympics is out of reach. And then it just kind of flickered up to life a little bit in the triathlon, and then it was doused again. And then that's ultimately what led me to switching to swimming.
And it was your coach, Mandy, who would actually come up with the idea of you pursuing swimming in the Paralympics.
Yeah, I had hired her to help me with the swim portion of triathlon. And I had only been swimming backstroke until I met Mandy, and she had worked on front crawl we call it freestyle, but normal people call it front crawl. So she had worked on that to help me for triathlon, just for sighting and things. And then when I told her that they had pulled the plug and I wasn't going to the Paralympics in triathlon, she was like, well, why don't we swim? And she tells me, I don't remember this, but she says that I said to her, just swim. And Mandy was like, yeah, it's only like one of the most popular sports in the Olympics and Paralympics. But so we switched and focused on just swimming. I went to my first swim meet in Edmonton and did really well, caught the attention of the national team, and it just went from there.
And what's been the biggest challenge in your Paralympic journey?
Just the fighting the clock and my brain at the same time. Like, I always knew the times I wanted or the times that I needed. Sometimes it was the same, sometimes it was different, and overcoming the bad days of training to keep going, like, having a bad day in the pool and not letting it derail me completely, and know that it was just today. Like, tomorrow I'll probably go much faster again.
Yep.
I think those were hardest. Even though I had overcame a lot of self-doubt and issues of my image or my abilities. I think any athlete, of course, too, it comes up when you're fighting to make teams and fighting to go best times. But it definitely fired for me as I was trying to make the team. And I wanted so bad to, even though it was many years past when I first dreamed of Paralympics, I wanted it so badly that sometimes that I did see the big picture too much and wasn't able to focus on the day-to-day little things that I normally did. And if I got wrapped up in the big picture of like, oh, if I swim this slow, I'll never make the team, then I would struggle more. So I had to take a step back and be like, hey, what did I do that gave me the comfort and success through other parts of my life? And so I had to start looking at training literally 125 meter or 150 at a time, one training session, one day at a time. And each day then let it go and start over the next day.
And then walk me through what it was like at the Rio Games, because when I remember, I was part of my track and field team in the 6th grade. And we traveled to Sri Lanka. We had a bunch of different teams from Asia and the Middle East. And I was so anxious. It was my 100-meter sprint. I honestly could not even move for the first few seconds. And I'm just thinking, you were in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people, millions of people watching all around the world. What was that feeling like?
I definitely had a lot of pre-race anxiety, but for me, it was one of those times when I had to shift perspective, and I had to use that anxiety because, excuse me, I actually found if I wasn't nervous, I didn't swim as well as if I was. And so I hated being nervous. I still, to this day, like after I retired, I said, I'm never doing anything again that makes me nervous because I hate it. But before I raced, I would be very like sick to my stomach, like under, extreme stress. And I definitely felt the anxiety, but I did learn to be like, oh, this is great. It feels terrible, but the worse it is right now, the better I am in the water. And so that shift in perspective really helped because it was so intense and so stressful for me. But once I made that shift, like I said, the nerves still were terrible, but I could just like embrace them and know that the nerves would lead to adrenaline, which would lead to a faster race time.
Wow. I think that's really important because even me, like if I'm speaking in front of a crowd or even before this podcast, I mean, there was anxiety and there is this level of stress that you feel. But in your case, what you're saying is the pre-anxiety, you would use that as fuel for motivation during the game. And is there something you tell yourself while you were swimming? Is there something you'd repeat to yourself, or is just you were just ready to go and you used all of that up as fuel?
Yeah, I just really grabbed that nerves and tried to build it. I actually even worked with especially into Tokyo, worked with a sports psych to build that excitement, to, I guess, build the nerves into excitement before a race, because if I swam without it, I was always slower. So I did need that to give me that kick of adrenaline. So once I hit the water, it typically was just about like, my Mandy always said, don't think, because if you think in sports, it's worse. Like you end up robotic or stiff or not. So she didn't want me to think very much. So usually once I hit the water, it would just be muscle memory and trying to let the mind go and not think about too much and just let the training take over. Once in a while, if the race was a bit of a longer race, it would just be keep pushing, or, something simple like that, or counting strokes, like something to occupy my mind, but not focus it on the technique or making me robotic.
Don't think.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
So it's essentially action over ideation. You want to take as much action as possible, and you want to leave the thinking for another day or time. I like that.
It's kind of the same even in a podcast like we're doing, or when I speak on stage too. I don't plan a lot before. I just want to go in and like let it flow, not think, just be just let it be kind of, and that seems to work really well for me.
And that you come off as somebody who's authentic, and it's coming from a place of authenticity, which is super important, because I feel like if you prepare too much, I don't think over preparation is a bad thing.
Mhm.
But I think that when you follow a script and you go, people can see through that in a
Yeah.
second. So if we were talking and we had a script and we were following it, I mean, anybody would be able to tell that these people aren't really, this is something that they prepared for months ahead. So it's just a matter of going there, showing up and doing the best you possibly can.
Yeah. And I think laying the groundwork ahead of time. So, the training and that preparation. And even when I speak, like, even though I'm not rehearsed and planned, there still was groundwork. Like, I know who I'm speaking to. I know what I'm speaking about. So there's that groundwork ahead of time. And then when it comes to event, it's just muscle memory, even whether it's in the pool or on the stage, just muscle memory and letting things go.
One of my mentors, Bob, he likes to say it's all about the setup. And he was also an athlete. So do you think that the fundamentals you've learned as a professional athlete who's competed at the world stage, do you think you can transfer those fundamentals to day-to-day life?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, learning the discipline, the structure, those all really help. Also learning when to let go, when to stop thinking, or not overthink at least. Those skills follow through for me, either in business or in speaking. Even in writing the book, there was times where, I just would voice speak what I was thinking and feeling, and then maybe briefly look at it after, but I didn't want to over edit myself. And I think that was the same in the pool. You don't want to over edit, right? You don't want to edit corrections of stroke in the pool or in other parts of life. So those lessons definitely transfer of being prepared, doing the work, doing the practice, but then moving forward in action.
And as I was reading your book, there were moments where I was sad. There were moments where I was happy. There was a moment where I laughed, and we'll get to that. But there's one specific moment that really caught my attention. It was about your father, and that he had passed away around the time that you were training to compete at the world stage. And there was a story of how your goggles filled up with water and you thought it was your goggles leaking, but it was actually you tearing up while you were swimming. So walk me through what you were feeling, because I feel like dealing with somebody really close to you passing away is one of the hardest challenges a human faces. But pair that up with competing and training to compete at the world stage. I mean, what was going through your head at that time?
It was really challenging because I had made the team in May or in April, I guess, and my dad passed away in May and the games were in August. And so even though I had made the team, I still, of course, had goals for the games. I still had improvements I wanted to make. And I was very, very focused on what would happen in Rio, because I also expected, at that time, that would be my only Paralympics. So I wanted it to be how I wanted it to be, right? So it was hard for me to let go of my schedule and my plan and my structure to take time to grieve my dad. And so I remember texting Mandy that he had passed, and then Mandy asked me about, well, how many days off do you want? And I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like, I'll be in the pool tomorrow morning. And so I think I missed one swim. I got back in the pool the next morning, and that's when my goggles filled. And because I was like, it's fine. It wasn't completely shocking that my dad passed. It wasn't fully unexpected. So I thought that I had grieved enough leading up to it that I could just kind of compartmentalize and put it aside. But it showed me in the pool that I couldn't do that. And I think like our mental state and our physical state is so tied together. So as I was doing this hard set and my body was hurting and like lactic acid was building up, my mental strength to cope with that normally would be really good. But because my mental thoughts were other places and were with my dad, I didn't have the strength to deal with the pain, both pains, the physical pain and the mental pain and grief of my dad. So yeah, I wound up like totally crying in my goggles, and I do think I ended up after that taking a day or two, probably still not as much as I should have taken to grieve because I was still so focused. But it was definitely a challenge to deal with all of that, all the feelings already of the stress of training, of competing in my first Paralympics, but yet honoring and grieving my emotions for my dad.
What's the one thing you remember about him the most?
His gentleness and kindness. Yeah, he was always he was encouraging, but also always understanding of mistakes or things not going right. He was pretty flexible that way. Like if I did something wrong as a kid, it wasn't about punishment, it was about learning. Instead of being stricter, like I said, punishing, it was about kindness of, well, this is why we don't do these things, or this is how you learn from your mistakes. It was that nature. He had a very, very soft nature.
And your parents gave you a lot of autonomy after the accident, because I remember you were trying to open a cupboard in your kitchen and your mom was looking at you, but she wasn't helping you.
Yeah.
Do you think that made a big difference in, the life you've built right now?
Yeah. And they definitely taught me that autonomy and independence and encouraged and pushed. I did have it naturally. I wanted to be independent, but they also, as I became older, I was doing things that they didn't feel so comfortable with. Like I was traveling on my own. I went to Europe by myself and these things that they weren't super excited about. And I finally turned around on them one day. I'm like, well, you made me this way, so it's your fault. And, I went bungee jumping and whitewater rafting and these kind of things that they didn't think that I should be doing. But like I said, I always turned it back on them that like, you encouraged me and built me this way.
So you mentioned your husband, Martin, throughout the book and the impact he's had on your life. But there are certain struggles you and him faced that a lot of people don't know about. And that's when you got together, there were people who weren't happy about the whole situation. There were people who were passing on judgment and people who were going as far as saying he was doing you a favor. What did that make you feel like? And more importantly, how did you overcome those challenges?
So it definitely brought me back to being a kid and making me feel unworthy or a less functioning member of society. And it kind of made me feel like we were in the 60s or the 50s or 60s of people seeing me as a burden. And that word was definitely even used that I would be burdening his life instead of adding to his life. Like people who didn't understand that at the time that I met him, I was already fully independent. I was living on my own, completely taking care of myself. I had my own home, like all of these things. There was no, I didn't need him in my life for any reason other than a partner, and because we loved each other, not because I needed someone to do things for me. So it was very challenging. And as far as overcoming it, I think, again, it might be one of those things that I didn't overcome really well, that I have some angry feelings about still and some frustrations. And I guess we overcame it just by him and I spent a lot of time talking ourselves. And he knew that was not the case, that I was definitely not burdening his life. We joke that, yeah, he carries the suitcases and I plan the trips, but but it's not just because I'm in a chair that's our division of labor. Yeah. It's just what works for us. But I think in the moments it had to just be, I just had to rely on the self-worth that I had built for myself. And even though other people thought this about me, I had to know that he didn't think it about me. And of course, I didn't think it about me. And I knew that I had something to offer him as much as he had to offer me. And I just had to really kind of go back into myself and remember, all the lessons that I had learned and all the strength that I had built, and just be like, it doesn't matter what others are thinking or saying. It matters only what Martin and I believed. And so remembering that about myself, remembering my worth, remembering the things that I had done and accomplished, let me just be able to set aside what other people thought. It still hurts and it still affected me, but we didn't let it impact our relationship. And then I didn't let it impact my self-worth.
Yeah. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react. So
exactly.
I think that's just so important with every facet of your life. It's your relationship, your work, because you've done things like you said, even your parents weren't particularly happy about. And even I read Martin has not been really happy about certain things, but he was always supportive. And your parents were also always supportive. And I think that's important. It's just having this support network around you. Even your siblings have played a major role in you becoming the person you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. It was always that, pretty well everyone close to me in my life who learned that they couldn't stop me, even if they wanted to, then shifted and pushed forward. So, my oldest brother Kevin and I went whitewater rafting together. And when we came around a corner and the guide on the raft said, "Oh, there's a cliff jump here if anyone wants to do it." And of course, nobody expected that I was going to do it. But my brother looked at me and I looked and he's like, "You want me to carry you up there, right?" And I'm like, I do.
Yep.
And he started laughing and he piggybacked me up to where we were going to jump off and threw me off. And so, he could have easily been like, "No, you're too fragile. You might get hurt. You might whatever," to not even go whitewater rafting with me in the first place, but to throw me off a cliff. And it might seem like such a small thing, but to me, it was like same that it was that support, that trust in me. Like he knew that it was my decision. I could make my own mind up. I could physically handle my body enough to do the jump and or the toss. And so those kind of supports over the years have always been huge, because if you're constantly are surrounded by people who tell you can't do things, no matter how strong you are, that will take you down at some point. And so it's important to have that support and then to choose the people who give you that proper support. And even if they don't agree, just like we talk about, not everyone is going to have the same politics, but it doesn't mean that we can't have a conversation. And so it's the same, even if people in my life didn't agree with some of the things that I wanted to do or thought it would be too hard for me, once they knew they couldn't dissuade me, then it was full support.
So Tammy, you talk about resilience several times in the book. You also talk about persistence, grit, and the cover of your book actually says a journey of grit, grace, and growth. What does resilience mean for you?
For me, it just means that continual ability to fight, that continual finding that within ourselves to keep pushing, to keep overcoming, no matter how many times that we feel like life knocks us down or things happen. It's just that finding that strength to keep going and to keep, and I think even to keep dreaming, because I think sometimes when we, maybe we achieve some dreams and it was a really hard journey, and so sometimes we back away. We're like, "Oh, well, if I don't dream too big, then I don't have to go through that journey." Whereas I feel like resilience means, okay, I've made this really big dream, or I've achieved this really big dream. What's the next big dream? And willing to knowing that you can go through that fight to achieve the next one, rather than being like, "Okay, I've achieved enough, I'm fulfilled." And so for me, resilience is that. It's just continually, I use the word a lot, but continually fighting.
I love that. Do you think setting goals is important for everybody?
I do. I think that it's hard to keep moving and keep getting up every day without that purpose or plan. And, after I retired, after the games in Tokyo, when I retired from competition, I had decided as I mentioned, I was done being nervous. I was done doing things maybe that were hard. I'd reached the pinnacle and that was it. I even said to my husband, I'm like, "I'm going to live in peace and joy, and that's it." What turned out, that was fine for a few months, and then it was boring. And I had hit the point of not feeling fulfilled, not living in my purpose about the time that you contacted me and just started discussing writing the book. And so I think, and it's not like I was, I wasn't just living frivolously and doing nothing with my life either, but I didn't have that purpose, and I didn't have a passion. I didn't have a plan. Like I said, my plan was living in peace and joy, but it turns out that wasn't a plan. It was a feeling, not a plan. And so I think it's always important to have goals that we're working towards, and whether it's in business or in hobbies, recreation, athletics, it doesn't have to always be the biggest things. It can just be, I want to learn how to speak French, or I want to learn to do something new. Like, it doesn't always have to be, I want to sell 10 million copies of my book, or I want to be be a TED speaker. Like, it doesn't have to always be the biggest ones.
Mhm.
I just think we need to have a mix of small goals and big goals throughout our whole life to keep us going, and to keep fulfilling that purpose and fulfilling the passions that we have, and to keep the fire lit within ourselves.
Yeah, not that many people talk about small goals. I feel like everybody's focused on big, big, big. I like you said, I want to be a TEDx speaker, or I want my book to sell 10 million copies. But the small goals actually matter much more than the big goals, because they're just steps that are leading towards that big goal. So for you, the small goals, has that been consistent even as you were an athlete? You don't become a Paralympian overnight. There are so many small things that you had to go through. So for anybody watching this who has no sense of purpose, who's lost, and who's confused with what they want to do with their lives, because it's a confusing time. We are being bombarded with social media and content, and everybody telling us that we need to grind and we need to work 18 hours a day, which I don't think is important. And I know that that's the opposite of what you think and what your philosophy is. How does one find their purpose?
That's a really hard question, and it's of course different for everyone, but I do think you find it small first. And I very much believe in balance, even though it's not really something in our world right now. A lot of people and a lot of speakers too on stage are like, oh, you have to live at 110% and a million miles an hour, and you have to live life on the edge. And I think there's a time for that, but I don't think it's something we can sustain every single day. And I don't think we have to sustain it every day to achieve our purpose. So I think for people who are really in the mud of it at the moment and lost, I think it's finding something small, like, maybe getting up at a certain time in a day, or getting outside every day, or making sure they're on time for work more often than not. Like, really little steps, baby steps first, baby goals, and then those goals build. And, I had the times that I was trying to achieve in swimming, it wasn't like my coach said, okay, we have to make the qualifying time, so swim it. Right? Like, she didn't just be like, go 54 seconds right now. It was, okay, in 6 weeks, we need to go a minute. In 3 months, we need to go 58. Like, it was always dropping down like that. And those were the goals. It wasn't the
Be the world
big
champion overnight.
It was the steps along the way. And I think that's important in all parts of life, not just athletics, but either in business or just in getting yourself up and going again, and trying to find your path. It's just like, make some really small goals first. And then also it makes it success easier, because when you can achieve the little goals, then it's like, okay, the next one can be a little bit harder, and you can build yourself back up.
Tammy, this has been a wonderful conversation. I mean, for those who don't know, I've met Tammy at least 24 times, but over Zoom. And although we live in Canada, this is the first time we're meeting. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you, being a part of your book, and I was telling Tammy this, but it took me 3 hours to read it for the second time on my flight here. And I never read books that quickly, but it made me feel a lot of different things. And I think that it's important for everybody around the world, because we're all so focused on this hustle culture that we forget that the small things matter. And what you've been able to convey with this book, and the message you pass on through your speaking and through your social media content, has always been, you are enough. And just like your title says, that you're still fighting. So Tammy, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time, and you're one of the people in my team who has been a positive influence. I wouldn't have written the book if it wasn't for your belief and faith in my story. So I appreciate you adding my new goal of at the time of writing the book, and fulfilling another one of my passions.
Thank you, Tammy.
Whether you're chasing a dream, facing an unexpected detour, or just trying to find your footing, I hope that you know that your journey matters, that your version of strength is enough, and that even when it feels like the story is over, there's always another chapter waiting. Because as long as we're still moving, still growing, still showing up, we're not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm still fighting. I'm still focused on drive and passion. And within that passion, I will find victory.